Coming to you from an undisclosed location, somewhere deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains, I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. Welcome to another episode of our daily show. And I want to give a shout out to our friend Ken Johnson, who I'll be interviewing just in a couple of minutes. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Folks, this is the Noble Gold Investments Market Update. Gold is up 46% in a year, doubling NASDAQ and S&P 500 gains. But this isn't just another rally. Global reserves are shifting as investors rush to secure physical gold, creating a massive supply gap. Gold is vanishing from the market, but you still have a chance. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com today and turn their panic into profit. Make a qualified investment, and Noble Gold will add a free 1/10 of an ounce gold coin to your order. Folks, Peggy and I did this 2 years ago. Best thing we ever did. I predict it's going to go way over 3,000. That's conjecture on my part. There's always a risk with any type of transaction like this, but I'm glad we did it, and I have a lot of confidence in Noble Gold. Once again, noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com. All right, folks, Ken and I have been at Prophecy Watchers Conference for a while now. Ken appeared in several of our films, and we'll probably do more with him in the near future. But Ken, thanks so much for coming on the record. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So you're going to be at the Prophecy Watchers Conference coming up at the end of the month. Folks, it is sold out, but you can get live streaming. Go to prophecywatchers.com, prophecywatchers.com. Check it out. You know, you can watch some of the greatest prophetic people, and I don't mean they're prophesying. I mean, they're into biblical prophecy and downloading all sorts of great information. You can sit around in your sweats and eat popcorn all day and watch everybody without having to, with the crowd and all the people and the driving of the conference. So live streaming is a great way to go. Ken, what will you be talking about at the conference?
Well, Dead Sea Scrolls and related material. Basically, the last 5 years or so, I've talked a lot about the Dead Sea Scrolls proper, the fact that they have commentaries on the major and minor prophets, prophecies themselves, extra biblical, all seeming to be 100% accurate. Now, man, recently, just in this last year or so, several of the different scholarly groups have started looking at what appears to be first century Hebrew manuscripts of the New Testament. And so that is pretty interesting. Copies of them, of course, but you can tell by the writing and the style and stuff that it's first century. And so we should have the entire 4 Gospels and then a few other New Testament books here sometime this year. So I've already started looking at some of them, and they seem to be fantastic. So again, it's just really amazing. You know, Paul says in Romans chapter 11 that eventually all Israel will be saved. And I really think the Dead Sea Scrolls started the Messianic movement in full. And I think these other things are going to come along now. You know, because if you're taught, don't pay attention to Christians or Christian churches. But my great-grandfather wrote these things, and he told me specifically what would happen, and it has. So what do you do with that other than investigate it?
Wow. You know, Biblical Archaeological Review, BAR, did like a coup d'etat in some ways, a stealth operation decades ago now, where these so-called academics had the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were all in this building. It had been like decades and decades. And finally, BAR went in there and took all the pictures of everything and then made it public. Speak to that. Tell us why that's so important.
It is important. I'm not saying there was a conspiracy or anything, but there was a great delay for quite a while.
Great delay.
Yeah, and basically, you can just look at the text and see what's going on. The people that controlled the entire thing basically were made up of Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. Well, you've got things in the Dead Sea Scrolls that talk about praying to angels as a sin. And then you've got extra biblical prophecy books. So that's the Catholics, and the Protestants kind of don't like those things. And then you've got things that very specifically talk about the Messiah coming, the date which he came, what happened, the age of grace starting. And those are things that Jews don't normally like to talk about. So a lot of that stuff was set aside, and then one thing led to another, of course. And That kind of stuff happened. Eventually we got the bulk of all of it out. But now we're looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls and seeing they talk about other books, other locations, other things, and people are beginning to go there and find more things.
Let me ask you something. People, I'm a student of the Book of Enoch. I've read it and reread it again. I continue to do so. I find that Enoch 1 is, when you overlay chapter 6 of Enoch with the King James version of Genesis 6, they're almost verbatim, word for word, except instead of sons of God, it talks about the angels of heaven. So why is Enoch important? And, really till it was R.H. Charles got it from Ethiopia, decades and decades ago. But then we find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why is that important?
Basically, again, it goes back to prophecy. The whole idea that the angels fallen angels, certain angels, tried to stop what was going on. And of course it failed. But one of the things that they tried to do is do genetic tampering. And according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, that kind of stuff comes back again. There may or may not be another incursion, but even if there's not, Nephilim technology, which is DNA sequencing, things like that, is supposed to come back. And there's a series of prophecies in the Dead Sea Scrolls about when we start playing around with this stuff again, some of the things that happen, and some of them have already happened. So again, it's one of those things that they warn us about. When you get to a place where doctors want to do experiments with your genes and see what happens, you say no, and you go back to the herbal medicine that they had. By the way, they lived on average 120 years.
Wow.
Most people back in that day lived about 60. So they knew something of what they were talking about.
I mean, that's just incredible, just incredible. Yeah. So why would the church proper, because remember, we go into 1,000 years of the Dark Ages where people can't read their Bible, and thank God for Tyndale, who, by the way, is burned at the stake for translating the Bible into English. I mean, you not making this stuff up. Why would they keep out the Book of Enoch? And, you studied this. Your life's work is with the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient manuscripts. Why would they go out of their way to push the Book of Enoch to the side, in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of different reasons. According to some of the scrolls, the Old Testament canon was closed at what we have as the 39 books. And then there's supposed to be a new covenant canon, which whenever the Messiah's first coming occurs, there's going to be, a New Testament. And so outside of those, there is a complete set of records and prophecies from the school of the prophets, but they're to be kept separate. And I think one of the reasons is if you try to convince someone to become a Christian and they have to read 5,000 books, they're going to say, "I'll forget it. I'll just never be saved. I can't do that."
Right.
So we want to keep the Bible, or they wanted to keep the Bible, minimum, everything you need for salvation. But then there are other things that are more important. But there are scrolls like, in addition to that, the Book of Enoch itself says that it's not to be put in that collection of books that the righteous live their life by, which we would call our canon. So it's not to be put in the Bible per se, but to be kept out for the generation on which the Great Tribulation occurs. That's in the first 6 chapters. So Enoch's understanding is this is more important for that generation. And that generation, the way the scrolls talk, it's a Jubilee cycle. So that's getting ready to happen in another year. And as we're making this, the date that we're making this actually is next week is the Jubilee year of this 50-year period. And then we have one more Jubilee period in which all the prophecies are supposed to be fulfilled, according to the scrolls.
So we're in a window of time, and many of us, who are looking at world events, believe that this is the last of the last days. Would you concur with that? And give us some bullet points, give us some markers, some highlights, which sort of would, illuminate that in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are many prophecies just from the scriptures, but from the scrolls also. I believe that the book of Obadiah is in the process of being fulfilled. The taking back of Gaza, the taking back of southern Lebanon, the expansion of Israel. Many of those things are prophesied in Obadiah, Zephaniah, and other places. But there's one really interesting prophecy in the Dead Sea Scrolls that talks about when Israel comes back for the second time, same kind of language used in Isaiah. There will be a 70-year period. They will do something wrong, which is a breach of contract. 70 years later, this will be fixed. And the first time that they ever did anything wrong as far as the land, the contract with the land, was the Suez Crisis, when they actually took the Gaza Strip and then turned around and gave it back. That was in 1956. So 70 years later is 2026. So by that time, the problem should be fixed. And we saw in 2023, the Gaza war began. And to my surprise, not even Israel, but President Trump gets elected, and he says, you know how to fix this? Let's just move everybody out and it won't be a Gaza anymore like that. That's a fulfillment of Obadiah and Zephaniah. That's also, if it happens in 2026, a fulfillment of this particular extra biblical prophecy. That's just one example of some of the things in the scrolls. It's just amazing to see that. And I don't know if that'll actually happen. We'll have to wait and see.
Wait and see.
Maybe the scrolls are garbled. You never know. But Josephus and the other historians talked about how they were 100% accurate prophets. And so I'm wanting to live a little longer. I'm studying the herbal medicine and doing these things. These prophecies are really amazing.
No, they are. And what I find incredible just about the whole biblical prophetic narrative is that thread of prophecy from Genesis to Revelation. You know, you try to tell people that there's no other tome on the planet that even comes close. Chuck Missler used to call the Bible an integrated message system, which really what it is. Thousands of years, there's no collusion between the authors. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. Someone outside of space and time is writing the end before the beginning and doing it with great specificity. Let me ask you something, because we're coming up about the halfway mark. I'm reading one of your books, The Early Church Fathers, and I find it, for me, that's never really delved into that. It's not only is it a primer, but it goes into depth about what they believed and why they believed it. And I'm using it. I'm savoring it each page, because it's just opening up. Oh, wow, this is why they did this, and this is why they said this, and oh, look at this. It's very interesting. Talk about that book, if you will.
Yeah, basically, when I first became a Christian, then realized there's different denominations and they divide on certain topics. I wanted to go back, and if the disciples of the apostles wrote extra stuff, just sermons, be they right or wrong, you'd be able to figure out what they believe about. Could you lose your salvation? Can you be sinlessly perfect? Do the gifts continue? What about the rapture of the church? Things like that. They would have commented somewhere along the line in all the sermons. So I went back. There's actually a 10-volume encyclopedia of Ante-Nicene Fathers, and I went through that entire thing and picked out what I consider the major points of doctrine. And so they're not Calvinist. They're not what we would call Roman Catholic. They don't use those terms, but the idea that someone is predestined for hell or salvation is not biblical according to them.
Which is one of the tenets of Calvinism, and Marian worship is one of the tenets of Catholicism. So
right. And so they talked about the gifts continuing up to the second coming. They talked about prophecy. They were premillennial. And actually, most people don't talk much about the pre-tribulational aspect, but most of the church fathers are pre-trib. I mean, you can very easily tell Papias, Irenaeus. We've got major books from the first century, like the Didache, the Testament of the Lord, and others that are very, very clear a pre-tribulational rapture concept. And so with all this stuff, it's amazing to me. I still run into people that say, well, that was invented by Darby in the 1800s.
Oh, it just drives me nuts. It really does. And folks, let me just weigh in on this real quick. Remember, we went through 1,000 years of dark ages where the common man could not read the Bible. Everything's in Latin. I mean, are you kidding me? And then all of a sudden, the printing press, 1444, Gutenberg, he starts laying this thing out. Tyndale translates it in English for the first time. So now we're up around, the 15th century, 16th century, and Tyndale's burned at the stake. But the common man can just read the Bible for the first time. Gee, Just like all of a sudden this whole Genesis 6 stuff explodes. Why? Because we have access to the scripture. All Darby did was go, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, a twinkling of an eye. I mean, there it is. It's in scripture. All Darby did was have access to it and then go, hey guys, look at this. Your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long all basically for trying to get the scriptures. We used Latin for a while.
Right.
Pieces of the Bibles were made from the Latin when they couldn't get the Greek. Eventually, they got an entire Greek manuscript, and then they realized there's other Greek manuscripts. So it's been a long process in doing this, but yeah, Darby was the one who made it popular by that time. And there were others actually back in the 15 and 1600s that believed in a rapture. There's a handful. I guess there's probably always been a handful. But the main idea is, for me, with that book that you're talking about, the ancient church fathers, if we go back to the disciples of the apostles, not the early Catholics or anything else,
Right.
but the people that studied under Peter, Paul, Mary, these guys, what would they say about this stuff? If you asked them, is it possible for this? Do the gifts continue? They talked about many of those things. And the fact that they were pre-trib rapturists is amazing. They outline the Bible and explain it the way they said the disciples explained it to them. So we have more insight actually than just like commentary on the scriptures. So again, they're church fathers. They're not considered by anybody to be authoritative or actual 100% prophets or anything like that. But unless they're lying, they say, look, I asked Peter and Paul and John, and they told me this is the way it is. So if that's true and that hasn't been tampered with, which maybe it has, then that would be the best commentary ever on this.
Absolutely.
When you get 40 or 50 of these guys in the first and second century all saying the same thing, that's pretty substantial.
It's very weighty, actually. I agree. Let me answer something. People, and a lot of skeptics do this too. Well, the Dead Sea Scroll, yeah, but we got the Nag Hammadi stuff, and it's like people are just right out. How can we, this? And they have a very anti-supernatural view, worldview. They have a very anti-supernatural worldview, so they just kind of throw everything into this, old time manuscript and put it in the blender, and it's just who cares, right? But there's a huge difference between what we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi manuscripts. Tell us what the difference is and why it's important to distinguish the difference.
Anybody that would sit down and just read them would be amazed at the scrolls. Sometimes they're complex, but they're always proven accurate or questioned. There's never anything in the scrolls that I know of that contradicts basic Christian doctrine or anything else. On the flip side of that, when you look at the Nag Hammadi scrolls, and I have, to be perfectly honest, it's like a teenager high on drugs talking to trees and flowers. That's basically the way it is. And I don't know one particular scroll out of the Nag Hammadi text that's not laughable, this kind of stuff. And there's all these errors in them. Basically, I put together one book it's called The Demonic Gospels. It's an overview of the Nag Hammadi scripts, basically just the doctrine. So we pull out the pieces. So they teach that you save yourself through Gnostic meditation. Jesus and Mary Magdalene were higher god and goddess that came down. And all this stuff is completely anti-Christian. But it's just got the characters, Jesus and Mary and Joseph and stuff like that in there. But Gospel of Thomas and those things are somewhat laughable.
Yeah. And I've read all those too. And it's just, and a lot of New Agers gravitate to that. Jesus kissed Mary on the mouth and all this other stuff. And let me just weigh in here for a second, which I find interesting. And I want to get your thoughts on this too. So Jesus is fully God and fully man. We know that. And that in itself is an incredible mystery, which I don't pretend to understand. But he's fully God and fully man. So when he's in the tomb and he finally resurrects, the first person he reveals himself to is Mary Magdalene. Somebody is writing, so hold that thought, Now go to the Garden of Gethsemane just a few days before. The apostles are a stone's throw away. So what's that? 30 yards, something like that, right? Under a tree asleep. But someone is watching the angel appear. Someone is seeing him sweat, Jesus sweat great drops of blood. Someone. And this is complete conjecture on my part, but it's not the disciples because they're all asleep. So who is it? Who loved them? Who's the first person that Jesus appears to? So I think, and I could get in all sorts of trouble on this one, but I think that he loved her as a man would love a woman, not in a lustful way or a sinful way, because he's without sin, but he's fully God and fully man. But he can't act on that, obviously, but he loved her. And this is why he appears to her. And, don't touch me yet. She falls in, she's like, there's a relationship there that I think is really not written, not talked about. And this is where the Gospel of Thomas, and he kissed her on the mouth. I don't believe that ever happened. And I'm not saying, I want to make it really clear. There's nothing inappropriate, but he loved her. On some level, he loved her. And what are your thoughts on that? Because, and let's go back to the garden. Who's watching all this? The Holy Spirit told the apostles to write that down. Yeah, maybe I get that, but is there an eyewitness that we did? It could be his mother. We don't know, but I'll just say, because I could go on here. Somebody knows that something is about to happen, and it's not the apostles because they're basically clueless. So I think it's Mary. That's why she's at the tomb trying to figure out what's going on here, and he appears to her. What are your thoughts on that? And if you disagree, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Remember, at the end of the Gospel of John, it says that this is written that you may believe, but there are so many things that Jesus did and said, if they were all to be written down, I would guess that the world couldn't contain the books. So there's a lot of, and there actually were other things written down about those kind of things. So we have from church history, and some of the church fathers talk about whole texts that give stories about different things. Papias and Hegesippus are two guys that recorded a ton of that kind of stuff. But yeah, somebody just taking an idea and perverting it and writing, fiction basically is what we have in the Nag Hammadi text, the Gnostic Gospels. But there's still a lot more information out there.
Do you think we'll find anything comparable to the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you think there's other caches of records that we just haven't discovered yet?
Yes, I believe so. There's a couple places that I know that there are things, but they don't dare dig them up because right now there's Palestinian territory, and especially right now with a war going on. But once things calm down and everybody recognizes Judea and Samaria as Israeli territory and there's no more Gaza Strip, and southern Lebanon is taken care of, at that point, things will be at peace, a peace and safety to a point. And yeah, they will dig stuff out. There's actually a Dead Sea Scroll comment that I could be taking it too far, but it talks about the old ones speaking much like Isaiah 29 does, but it kind of talks about it happens during the last generation, which to them is the last Jubilee. So it looks like there's a large amount of manuscripts, like a library, that we'll find sometime in the next few years. That's my guess, but we'll see what happens.
And I think we're in a window. I want to weigh in on this. I think we're in an unprecedented window of time in all the history. And just the fact that we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, that in itself, I might put you on the spot here, but there was an archaeological find, and Avi Lipkin was the one who brought it to my attention, talking about this little lead tablet. Are you familiar with that at all?
The Curse Tablet?
The Curse Tablet.
Yes, very familiar with it.
So let me just give the audience what that says. Okay, this was found on Joshua's altar, which is, he built this right after the conquest of Ai. And I find the location of the gateway to the Promised Land. It's not, is it Mount Nebo? I always get the name confused. Or Ebal.
On the backside of Mount Ebal. But
yeah, Ebal. Okay. So, which is the gateway to the promised land. And it says, curse, curse, cursed, cursed of Yahweh. You will die cursed, 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 cursed. Now, Mother Gonzalez and I have gone around and around on this, as well as other people. Well, it's the law. It's if you don't, I'm not buying that for a minute, because it's Joshua's altar. It's the conquest of Ai, Nephilim tribes. In my opinion, and I told this to the archaeologists on that Zoom meeting that we had. And I get it. I'm completely 110% biased in this statement. I totally understand. I'm coming from, the Nephilim are in the land, the giants are there, and the conquest of Canaan is the tribes going at it. Curse, 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 cursed of Yahweh, you will die cursed. Curse, curse, curse. This, in my opinion, that curse is out to those Nephilim tribes. Your thoughts on that?
I never really thought of that before, but that is an interesting point. It very well could be. The main thing that I thought was fascinating about it is that it's not even Paleo-Hebrew, it's Proto-Hebrew. So they stopped doing that around the 15th or 14th century BC. So the whole idea, number one, it's not a Canaanite altar. It's definitely Joshua's altar.
Right, Joshua's altar, right.
And the second thing to that, a lot of people try to say, well, but they didn't come in until the 1200s BC. Now, the Bible, the chronology, and the scrolls, all of it agree. It was around right around 1500 BC, 1450
right.
15.
I agree.
And this corroborates it. They didn't write like that except back at that time. So it's just an amazing thing how things like that, even if you don't get anything else out of it, the fact that it proves the early Exodus state, just like the Bible and the other manuscripts.
And it states Yahweh's name for the first time. I mean, there it is 3,500 years ago, written in Proto-Canaanite on that little lead tablet. Cursed of Yahweh. That's astounding. Just astounding. Well, we'll see you at the Prophecy Watchers Conference. Ken, thanks for coming on. I'll give you the last word. Tell us how to get your books. And folks, if you're inclined to a great read, but a deep dive in sort of an academic way, Ken is the place to go. Tell us how to get your stuff, get your tools.
My website is biblefacts.org, F-A-C-T-S, like a fact. We teach live on YouTube on Monday nights, was a live Q&A. So far I've written 35 books, probably about 6 or so on Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow.
A lot of the commentaries and the prophecies and stuff that are interesting. So, but yeah, just visit biblefacts.org and you'll be able to go to any of those links.
Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Folks, there you go. Ken Johnson, he'll be speaking at the Prophecy Watchers Conference. Live streaming is available. ProphecyWatchers.com, ProphecyWatchers.com. Don't forget Rungs of Disclosure, RungsofDisclosure.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Ashley, and I'm excited to talk to you about L.A. Marzulli's new book, Rungs of Disclosure. What has been called his most important work to date, Rungs of Disclosure uncovers the shocking truth about UFOs and UAPs, information that has been hidden from the public since the Roswell crash of 1947. The book begins with F-18 fighter pilot Commander David Fravor, who made headlines when he appeared on Tucker Carlson and stated on the record that the UFO he encountered was not of this earth. His testimony was the catalyst for this book, the first rung on the ladder of disclosure. LA warns that we are heading toward what he calls the coming Great Deception. Everything we know, now is the time to uncover the facts. Now is the time to be prepared. Visit rungsofdisclosure.com to get your copy of L.A. Marzulli's latest book today. Arm yourself with the truth about the UFO phenomenon from a biblical perspective. To explore all of L.A.'s other work, head over to lamarzulli.com.